In 1945, audiences were introduced to Christopher Cross, a lonely, mild-mannered cashier trapped in a miserable marriage, whose only joy in life was his secret, brilliant passion for painting. But one rainy night in the streets of Greenwich Village, a chance encounter with a beautiful and mysterious woman named Kitty March sends his entire world spiraling into a dark and tragic obsession. Fritz Lang's Scarlet Street is one of the most powerful, cynical, and devastating films in the history of film noir. It's a bleak story of unrequited love, cruel betrayal, stolen art, and a perfect crime that leads to an even more perfect and truly horrifying, eternal punishment. But behind the camera, the story of its creation is just as fascinating, filled with censorship battles, brilliant artistic choices, and the quiet tragedies of its legendary cast. Today, we are pulling back the dark, rain-soaked curtain on this banned masterpiece to uncover the secrets hidden in its shadows. These are 15 dark and fascinating facts you never knew about Scarlet Street. Number 15. The gold watch that wasn't gold. The film opens with a scene of pathetic celebration. Christopher Cross, after 25 years of loyal, unremarkable service as a cashier, is being honored by his boss, Joe G. Hogarth. He is presented with a 14-karat gold watch. This watch becomes the film's central and most cynical symbol. For his boss, it's a cheap and meaningless reward for a faceless cog in the corporate machine. For Chris, it represents his entire wasted life, a quarter-century spent in a cage, reduced to a single small object. The watch is true. Insulting nature is revealed later in the film. When Chris, desperate for money to give to his new love, Kitty tries to pawn this prized possession, he discovers the horrifying truth. The watch his boss gave him is a cheap fake. It's not solid gold at all. This moment is a brutal and brilliant metaphor for his entire existence. Everything he thought was valuable or genuine in his life, including his boss's appreciation, and, ultimately, Kitty's love is a worthless, hollow imitation. The ticking of the watch is the sound of his life running out, a life where every promise has been a lie. Number 14. The heroic dead. Husband's dark secret. One of the most darkly comic and yet deeply pathetic parts of Christopher Cross's life is his miserable, hen-pecked marriage to his wife, Adele. She is a cruel and nagging woman who constantly worships the memory of her heroic first husband, a policeman named Inspector Higgins, who supposedly died a hero's death. She keeps a large, imposing portrait of him on the wall, complete with his medal for bravery, and uses it to constantly belittle Chris. But the film, in true noir fashion, reveals a shocking secret. Higgins wasn't a hero at all. He was a corrupt cop who drowned while trying to save a woman he was involved with, and his body was never found. This sets the stage for one of the film's most brilliant and cynical twists. The dead husband is not dead. He reappears, revealed to be a con artist who faked his own death for the insurance money, and he returns to blackmail Chris. This twist shatters the one thing Adele held sacred and tightens the tragic knot around Chris's neck. Number 13. The fateful lie that started it all. The entire tragic misunderstanding of the film is built on a single, fateful, and pathetic lie. After Chris rescues Kitty from her attacker in the rain-slicked streets, they go for a drink. He is instantly smitten, but deeply embarrassed by his reality as a lowly cashier. When she, surrounded by the bohemian art studios of Greenwich Village, asks what he does, he can't bring himself to tell the truth. He nervously looks around and lies, saying, "Well, yes, I paint." Kitty and her manipulative boyfriend, Johnny, who was the very man attacking her, immediately latch onto this. They see him as a pigeon to be plucked, assuming he must be a rich and famous artist who is merely modest about his success. They are only interested in him because they believe he has money. Chris, on the other hand, is only interested in her because she is the first person in his entire life to ever show respect for his art. This one, tiny, pathetic lie told by a lonely, middle-aged man who is desperate for a single drop of validation, becomes the engine for the entire plot, a single loose thread that will unravel his entire world. Number 12. The accidental and fatal rescue. The film's meet cute, the moment the two protagonists meet, is a perfect twisted noir setup. Christopher Cross, walking home from his office party, full of champagne and false confidence, sees a man assaulting a young woman in the street. In a rare act of bravery, he intervenes, hitting the attacker with his umbrella and rescuing the beautiful woman, Kitty March. This single heroic act is what binds him to her and sets the entire devastating tragedy in motion. The terrible dark irony, which Chris only learns later, is that the attacker wasn't a random mugger at all. It was her manipulative, parasitic boyfriend, Johnny Prince. And the man Chris was rescuing her from was the very man he should have been protecting her from. This accidental, completely misunderstood moment of chivalry, born from a simple case of mistaken identity, is the single event that seals his doom. It's a perfect example of the film noir concept that no good deed, no matter how small, ever goes unpunished. His one act of heroism was, in fact, his first step into the grave. Number 11. The secret studio that became a tomb. One of the most poignant symbols in the film is the secret apartment in Greenwich Village. After Chris's cruel wife, Adele, refuses to let him paint in their home, even going so far as to threaten to throw his art in the trash, he sees an opportunity. He uses his own money, which he later has to steal from his boss, to rent a small, light-filled studio for Kitty. In his mind, this apartment is a secret haven, a sacred space where he can finally escape his miserable marriage, be with the woman he adores, and most importantly, paint in peace. He fills it with his art, his easels, and his supplies. It is the one place on Earth where he feels he can truly be himself. The tragic irony, of course, is that this supposed haven becomes his personal hell. It's the place where Kitty and Johnny betray him. And it's the place where, in the film's climax, his fantasy shatters and he commits the murder that destroys his life. The one place that was supposed to represent his freedom and his art becomes the very scene of his damnation. Number 10. The theft of a man's soul. The film's most scathing and brilliant critique is reserved for the pretentious, snobbish world of high art. After Johnny and Kitty successfully steal Chris's paintings, they try to sell them. At first, a pawn shop dealer tells them the art is worthless, childish junk. But when the paintings are discovered by the influential art critic, David Janeway, he hails them as undiscovered masterpieces of a new, modern, primitive style. The entire art world immediately falls in love with the paintings, not because of their inherent quality, but because of the story they invent for them. They become obsessed with the idea that these raw, powerful paintings were created by a passionate, untrained, and mysterious woman named Kitty March. The film brilliantly satirizes the critics and collectors who gather around the art, praising its feminine power and masculine brushwork, all while being completely and utterly blind to the fact that the real artist is a sad, mild-mannered, middle-aged man. This theft of his identity, of his very soul, is the cruelest cut of all for Chris, forcing him to watch from the sidelines as his life's work is celebrated, but only under someone else's name. Number 9. A savage kiss and a twisted heart. The central relationship in Scarlet Street is a dark and complex triangle of twisted desires. It's defined by Chris's pathetic, almost childlike adoration for Kitty, and her cold, calculated manipulation of him. In one of the film's most powerful and uncomfortable scenes, Chris is finally overwhelmed with emotion for her. He grabs her in a desperate, clumsy, and almost violent embrace. Trying to kiss her, she is repulsed, calling his genuine, raw passion savage. This moment perfectly illustrates the film's dark theme. Chris is a man who craves real intimacy and love, but is terrified of it. The one time in his life he finally, truly acts on his passion, it is with a woman who is completely incapable of returning it. In a cruel twist, the only person Kitty feels that savage passion for is her abusive, parasitic boyfriend, Johnny, who treats her terribly. This dark, inverted dynamic, where genuine love is seen as savage and abuse is seen as true passion, is the rotten core of the film's tragedy. Number 8. The Murderer's Self-Portrait. One of the most brilliant symbolic props in the entire film is the portrait that Chris paints of Kitty. He first paints it as a loving, idealized vision of her as a beautiful, ethereal, and almost angelic woman, a representation of the fantasy he has built in his mind. However, after he murders her with the ice pick, he returns to the studio in a fit of tormented rage and grief. He looks at the painting and, in a symbolic act of killing her a second time, he picks up his brush and violently defaces his own work. He paints over her loving face, transforming the angelic portrait into a demonic, grotesque, and almost skeletal mask. This defaced painting, which Kitty herself had ironically titled Self-Portrait, becomes his most celebrated and valuable masterpiece. It is the ultimate dark joke on the art world, which praises the inner torment and raw power of the female artist, not knowing that what they are actually looking at is the literal, psychological torment of the man who murdered her. Number 7. The Blackmail from Beyond the Grave. Just when Chris's life seems like it can't possibly get any worse, the film delivers its most brilliant noir twist. The heroic first husband of his wife Adele, Inspector Higgins, the man who supposedly died a hero's death and whose portrait has haunted Chris's marriage for years, suddenly shows up at his office. He is not dead. He is a con artist who faked his own death years ago to get the insurance money. He immediately recognizes Chris's desperation and his affair with Kitty, and he begins to blackmail him for every penny he has. This twist is a masterstroke of noir fatalism. Chris is now trapped from every conceivable angle. He's being bled dry by Kitty and Johnny on one side, and now he is being blackmailed by the ghost of his wife's past on the other. He is a man with no way out, a cornered animal being pushed closer and closer to the breaking point by a world that seems systematically designed to destroy him. Number 6. The Pathetic and Domestic Murder Weapon. In a brilliant and dark piece of screenwriting, the very tool of Chris's supposed liberation becomes the weapon of his final destruction. After his wife Adele refuses to let him paint in their apartment, Chris rents the secret studio in Greenwich Village for Kitty. This studio is his escape, his haven, the one place he can be his true self. But in the film's climax, after Kitty has humiliated him, mocked his art, and admitted she only ever loved Johnny, Chris's fantasy world shatters. He returns to this haven, and in a fit of pure, pathetic rage, he grabs an ice pick from the studio's icebox. Not a gun, not a dramatic weapon, but a simple, domestic tool, and murders her. The one place that was supposed to represent his freedom and his art becomes the scene of his damnation. The use of a common household ice pick is a key detail, cementing his status as a little man, a pathetic and weak figure whose one act of ultimate violence is just as clumsy and domestic as the rest of his life. Number 5. Sending the wrong man to the electric chair. The film's dark, cynical plot reaches its absolute pinnacle after the murder. The police, blinded by their own assumptions, immediately and incorrectly believe that the violent, small-time crook, Johnny Prince, must be the killer. All the circumstantial evidence points directly to him. In the film's most devastating and morally bankrupt scene, Christopher Cross, the real murderer, is called to the witness stand during Johnny's trial. He has one final chance to confess, to tell the truth, and to save an innocent, if awful, man's life. Instead, in an act of pure, cold-blooded self-preservation, he calmly lies under oath, committing perjury and sealing Johnny's fate. He sits silently in the courtroom and watches as Johnny is found guilty and sentenced to the electric chair for a murder that Chris himself committed. This act solidifies Chris's transformation. He has not only killed the woman he loved, but has now murdered his rival through a calculated and despicable act of cowardice, all while the world and his wife praise him for his courage. It is the perfect crime, and it ensures his complete and total spiritual destruction. Number 4. The film that was banned in 3 states. The ending of Scarlet Street is one of the most brutal and cynical in all of 1940s cinema, and for this very reason, the film was banned. The all-powerful Motion Picture Production Code, the Hays Code, had a strict, non-negotiable rule. All crimes committed on screen must be explicitly punished on screen. A murderer could never, ever get away with it. But in Scarlet Street, Christopher Cross does exactly that. He is never arrested for the murder. In fact, the world believes he is a hero. This was a direct and shocking violation of the code. As a result, the film was banned outright by censors in several major cities and even 3 states, including New York, Atlanta, and Milwaukee, who called it immoral, indecent, and a glorification of crime. The producers had to fight a long and expensive legal battle, arguing that Chris's final fate, a living hell of homelessness, insanity, and eternal private torment, was a far greater and more profound punishment than a simple execution. They eventually won, and the film was released, but its devastating final scene remains a landmark moment in film history, a brutal challenge to the era's forced morality. Number 3. The Noir, Holy Trinity, reunited the incredible, almost toxic, chemistry between the film's 3 main stars, Edward G. Robinson as the pathetic Chris Cross, Joan Bennett as the manipulative femme fatale Kitty March, and Dan Duryea as the slimy, charismatic Johnny Prince, was not an accident. The producers, in a stroke of genius, deliberately reunited this specific trio after their massive, breakout success in another Fritz Lang directed noir just 1 year earlier, 1944's The Woman in the Window. In that film, they had already perfected their dynamic, Robinson as a mild-mannered professor, Bennett as a mysterious and dangerous woman, and Duryea as a sinister blackmailer. The studio saw a golden opportunity to capitalize on their proven box office appeal. Scarlet Street was a conscious effort to take that same dynamic and push it to even darker, more twisted, and more tragic limits. It was a brilliant move. Audiences got to see the same actors they loved, but this time they were trapped in a story with no hope and no escape, creating what is now considered one of the most iconic and perfectly cast trios in all of film noir history. Number 2. The cynical French original, The Bitch. While Scarlet Street feels like a quintessential American film noir, with its dark shadows, its rain-slicked city streets, and its desperate, doomed characters, it is actually a meticulous, almost scene-for-scene, remake of a 1931 French film. That original film, directed by the legendary Jean Renoir, was called La Chienne, which literally and crudely translates to The Bitch. The producer, Walter Wanger, had seen the French film and became obsessed with adapting its cynical, grim story for an American audience. The plots are nearly identical. A mild-mannered cashier, trapped in a terrible marriage, falls for a manipulative woman who, along with her pimp, steals his paintings and passes them off as her own, leading to a tragic end. Renoir's original was a masterpiece of poetic realism, a movement that was cynical, gritty, and deeply humanistic. Fritz Lang, himself an icon of German expressionism, took that story and transformed it into a darker, more psychological, and more visually stylized film noir, filling every frame with shadows, mirrors, and a suffocating sense of fatalism. Number 1. The final, haunting punishment, a living hell. The final scenes of Scarlet Street are what elevated from a simple crime story to a truly profound noir masterpiece. After getting away with the perfect crime, Christopher Cross is completely and utterly destroyed. He is fired from his job after his wife's dead husband, Higgins, outs him for stealing money. He is left homeless, a broken and anonymous man wandering the streets of New York, a ghost in his own life. In the film's final agonizing scene, he shuffles past a high-end art gallery and through the window sees his own self-portrait, the defaced one he painted of Kitty, being sold for a staggering $10,000. He is a pathetic, invisible figure, forever trapped on the outside, looking in at his own stolen soul. As he walks away into the cold, uncaring city, he is haunted by the disembodied, ghostly voices of Kitty and Johnny, the two people who ruined him, who will now live in his head, rent-free for the rest of his miserable life. This ending, a living, breathing hell on earth, rather than a simple execution, is one of the most powerful, bleak, and terrifying punishments in the history of cinema. Scarlet Street remains a dark and complex masterpiece, a perfect, cynical jewel of film noir. It's a chilling character study of how one small, pathetic lie and a lifetime of quiet desperation can lead a good man to commit the ultimate sin. The tragic story of Christopher Cross, the manipulative Kitty, and the vile Johnny Prince is a perfect, inescapable triangle of betrayal and greed. From its battles with censorship to the brilliant, reunited cast and its bleak, unforgettable ending, this film dared to show a side of human nature that Hollywood preferred to keep hidden in the shadows. It's a story that proves the most terrifying prison isn't one with bars, but the one we build inside our own minds, a living hell from which there is truly no escape.